So I wanted to give you guys a rundown of the DNC chair debate that aired on the Huffington Post. Now, overall, I went into this debate with rose-colored glasses, and I was trying to look for things to be optimistic about, because in the era of Trump, I know people are demoralized, and I know that we need something that's going to give us hope. But unfortunately, I came away from this debate completely disappointed, overwhelmingly disappointed, quite frankly. And this is because what little hope I had left in the Democratic Party, what little enthusiasm I had about even Keith Ellison, I feel like that was all dashed, because there were some things that I heard from this debate that I not only disagreed with, but I just found it outright disturbing. And there's many reasons here that I have for you. So to kind of start off, what I've said previously is that going forward, the Democratic Party, they can't change the past, but what they need to do is acknowledge the elephant in the room. They need to acknowledge that what the DNC did in the 2016 Democratic primaries, that was unethical, and it was also tantamount to fraud, hence why there is a lawsuit going on against the DNC right now because of what they did to Bernie Sanders and his supporters and how they tipped the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton. And the candidates were asked what they thought the DNC did wrong in 2016, and we'll go ahead and hear them out, but I'll tell you why I was disappointed in their responses.
The biggest mistake that the DNC made, not just in the 2016 election, but in all of the elections that I can think of before that, is not having an overarching identity message that as Democrats we can be proud to stand under. I've been doing work in Idaho, and one of the things that's killing us is the brand that Democrats have, and unfortunately that brand got even more damaged this year.
The biggest mistake that the DNC made, I agree with Sally. The problems that we had weren't 2016 problems. Problems that we had were that the fact that we abandoned the 50-state strategy that Howard Dean started when he was chair of the DNC.
These aren't incorrect answers, let's be clear here. These are relatively good answers, but they're not addressing the main problem and the main thing that the DNC got wrong. And this was screwing over half of the party by tipping the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton. Now, if you're wondering why these people did not address this, or if they were avoiding it, well, it's because they were asked whether or not the DNC tipped the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton during the 2016 Democratic primaries, and they just outright reject that idea.
Another show of hands question. Who here believes that the DNC did unfairly put its thumb on the scale during the 2016 primary?
That's a gotcha question I'm not going to answer. Thank you.
So that right there, in my opinion, was an abomination. I'm disappointed in every single person on that stage right there, because that's not a gotcha question. I think that was a question that's crucial, and I'm really glad that the Huffington Post moderators asked this question. If you can't admit that the DNC tipped the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton at a minimum during the Democratic primaries, then I don't think you're fit to be DNC chair, because we want you to admit that this is what they did, because going forward, I want you to be cognizant of this reality and assure us that you're also going to be a neutral arbiter. But unfortunately, you decided to reject this premise altogether when the evidence is clear. If the DNC did not tip the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton, then why is it that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was forced to resign? Did she just resign on her own accord? No, she was forced out because she was exposed as someone who rigged the primaries against Bernie Sanders. And out of all of these people, Keith Ellison probably disappointed me the most because he didn't have the courage to raise his hand. Keith, of all people, you know that the primaries were completely unfair to Bernie Sanders. You know Debbie Wasserman Schultz rigged the primary, and the same smear tactics that they used against Bernie Sanders, well, they're using them against you to defeat you in the DNC chair race. So how could you not have the courage, Keith, to admit that the primaries were rigged? How could you betray Bernie Sanders supporters and ignore this fact that has us completely pissed off? I'm not willing to forgive or forget this. I want the party to address it. I want a DNC chair that's going to address this and apologize to us for doing what they did. And not just because I'm petty and I want an apology. I want them to acknowledge this because it's important that they are aware of this and they don't do it again. But because of their answers, I'm worried that any of these people will be just as inclined as Debbie Wasserman Schultz to rig a primary against the grassroots candidate in favor of the establishment's choice. So that was just one of many aspects of the DNC chair race that I just found downright disgraceful. Now, another crucial thing that I wanted addressed in this race is whether or not the next DNC chair would reinstate President Obama's ban on lobbyists and corporations' donations to the DNC. And again, their answers were really disgusting.
When lobbyists or corporations give us any money, what are they going to get from the DNC? It's not like we have a vote in Congress. We can't determine any laws.
If I do become DNC chair, I'm not going to impose a policy on anybody. We're going to have a democratic process on how we arrive at funding the Democratic Party.
So hands down, the worst answer came from Jamie Harris. He said, when lobbyists or corporations give us money, what are they going to get from the DNC? It's not like we have a vote in Congress. Well, the reason why he's saying that is not only because he's misinformed, but this guy works for a lobbying firm, and not just any lobbying firm. He works for the lobbying firm of John Podesta's brother. He was a huge Hillary Clinton cheerleader. So of course he's going to say that, but also to answer his question, what are they going to get from the DNC? I don't know. Maybe it's the case that corporations and lobbyists will contribute to the DNC in hopes that they'll tip the scales in favor of the candidates that will better favor their corporate business interests. Did you not think about that? Maybe it's the case that corporations donated to the DNC because they wanted Debbie Wasserman Schultz to rig the primaries in favor of Hillary Clinton. Did you ever think about that? And furthermore, why would you want money from lobbyists and corporations? The correct answer here is just to say, look, I don't want their money. We're rejecting their money on the principle alone. We don't want the money of corporations and lobbyists because we're a party of the people. We're a party of the 99%, not these rich oligarchs that continue to buy off our elections and politicians. So you've got it completely backwards here, Jamie Harris, and you should be ashamed of yourself that you are running to be the head of a party that's supposedly a champion of the working class. Disgraceful. Now, admittedly, I was also disappointed in Keith Ellison's response here too, because I don't know if you picked up what he was putting down there, but he's wavering on his decision to ban lobbyist contributions to the DNC. He says that he will not unilaterally impose this policy. He's going to leave it up to a democratic vote within the DNC. That's not what I wanted to hear, Keith. The reason why progressives are uniting behind you right now and fighting for you is because we have faith in you, or we're trying to have faith in you, that you're going to get in there and slap the Democratic Party and throw a bucket of cold water over the heads of every member of the DNC. They need a wake-up call. If you allow them to decide whether or not they should continue to take bribes from large corporations and lobbyists, of course they're going to do that. That's why they lost. They need someone who's going to get in there and take a wrecking ball to every single old establishment philosophy that they continue to champion. And you are now telling me that maybe I'm not going to impose this ban on lobbyist contributions. I'm going to leave it up to everyone. I think we're going to come to a democratic decision. Wrong answer, Keith. Wrong answer, and I'm very disappointed in you here. Now, also, the candidates talked about the ongoing proxy war between the Hillary Clinton wing and the Bernie Sanders wing of the party, and this is another area where I was just incredibly disappointed as well.
A false choice is being laid at our feet, that there's a portrayal of this competition for chair as though it were a choice, as though it were a choice between one wing of the party and another, as though it would be a defeat for some Democrats and a victory for others. That presentation is unfair to the candidates who are here. We need to transcend that, get past that, and be united.
Now, I am entirely dissatisfied with that answer because he says it's false to assume that the outcome of this race would be a defeat for one wing of the party and a win for the other. Because it would. The question is really simple here. Are you going to be the party of the working class, or are you going to continue to do the bidding of large corporations and billionaires? And by allowing Tom Perez, for example, or Jamie Harris to win, you're choosing the elites over the working class. Are you going to be a party of the 99% or the 1%? So to just stick your head in the sand here and try to pretend like this proxy war isn't going on, yeah, it's going on here. And why are we fighting to just have a voice in the party when you guys should be kissing our asses right now? It's just so infuriating to me because I feel as though they're never going to get it. Now, when it comes to Tom Perez, he performed about as well as I expected.
Well, Donald Trump is what we call a target-rich environment. Yeah. But, you know, what we can't do is go after him every time. You can't meet him tweet for tweet. I think we've got to be surgical. We've really got to understand also that you don't go to a knife fight with a spoon.
So if that didn't prove to you that Tom Perez is a calculating, focus group-driven, poll-minded politician, I don't know what is. Because when he said, you can't meet him tweet for tweet, he was so proud of that. Did you see it on his face? Oh, you can't meet Donald Trump tweet for tweet. He even said it twice. But it was a fail. It reminded me of this moment from Tim Kaine.
Do you want a you're hired president in Hillary Clinton, or do you want a you're fired president in Donald Trump?
And then he also quickly said something that I think we need to decode a little bit. He said, we've got to understand that you don't go to a knife fight with a spoon. We've got to fight back. Now, this might seem like a relatively benign statement to most people, but when Democrats say this, what they're typically referring to is money in politics. So, for example, David Brock says the same thing. He says he's against money in politics. He said this in his open letter that was an apology to Bernie Sanders. He said, well, you know what? I'm against super PACs, and I would love to get out of the business of super PACs, but unfortunately, we can't unilaterally disarm when the Republicans have super PACs. So the same argument that Democrats have been making consistently is being made here by Tom Perez. Well, you know, if Republicans are taking money from billionaires, if they're taking money from super PACs, if Republican presidential candidates and House and Senate candidates have super PACs, then why should we disarm? Why show up to a gunfight with a spoon? And this is bullshit. It's been debunked and proven to be wrong by Bernie Sanders because he did show up to a gunfight with a spoon, and Bernie Sanders nearly won a rigged primary. He did not have a super PAC. He only accepted contributions from individual donors, the working class. He didn't take billionaire money, and he almost defeated Hillary Clinton in an unfair primary. So that line of reasoning has got to be it's got to be put in a box and buried deeply because it's bullshit. Now, there was a point in there that I found interesting. So they were asked whether or not Haim Saban should apologize to Ellison for calling him an anti-Semite.
Please raise your hand if you think Saban should apologize for those remarks. Would anybody like to take the question?
Sure. I think it's important that we realize that this is bigger than our own selves. What we're fighting against with Donald Trump means that we all have to be together.
I just think everybody should know that Haim and I did have a phone call. I won't disclose what we talked about, but it was amicable, and we're going to get together and build on our relationship. So I don't want anybody to think that that was the last word. It wasn't. And I think we're on the road to recovery in that regard. So I just wanted people to know that, and I'll let my colleagues address.
Thank you.
Keith is a great guy who works hard each and every day for his constituents. And so we need to, as a party, stop with all of the demonization of each other and focus on the real war right now, and that is against Donald Trump.
30 seconds.
I think I may have been the only one who did not raise my hand, and that's because I think as Democrats, we need to stop falling for these gotcha questions. I think when the media wants to divide us in this way, divide our funders from our potential leaders, we need to just stop taking the bait. So I'm not going to take the bait on that question of division. I'm not going to take the debate on the Sanders versus the Clinton divide. And I would look to all of my candidates up here and say, let's stop taking the debate.
Now, I was glad that the other DNC chair candidates did not use this opportunity to attack Keith Ellison, but what was odd about this is I found myself more disappointed in Keith Ellison's response than anyone else's. He said, Saban and I had a phone call and it was amicable, and we're going to get together and build on our relationship. This wasn't what I wanted to hear, Keith. You are literally admitting to us that you're taking calls from a billionaire donor and that you're trying to cultivate a relationship with a billionaire donor who previously smeared you arbitrarily. We came out and defended you from this guy who's a mega donor. His voice is much louder than everyone else's who votes Democrat, who is a constituent of Democrats and you're taking his calls? We don't want you to get cozy with billionaires. What you should be doing, Keith Ellison, is telling him to take a hike right now, because if you are saying that you're going to work on your relationship with Haim Saban, you're communicating to progressives that you're not that progressive after all. You want these cozy relationships between the Democratic Party and their billionaire funders. Not acceptable. And then we had Jimu Green. She said, we need to stop falling for these gotcha questions. When the media wants to divide us this way, divide our potential leaders from our funders, we just need to stop taking the bait. So she probably thought that she was saying something really profound here, but what she was saying was terrible. She's saying that she doesn't want there to be any tension between the Democratic Party donors and the Democratic Party leaders, or potential Democratic Party leaders. Sorry, I've got news for you. I want there to be a divide between the Democratic Party's donors, the billionaire class, the lobbyists, and Democratic Party leaders. I want the Democratic Party donors to hate Democrats so much that they abandon the party altogether, and the Democratic Party has nowhere left to turn but voters. And I shouldn't have to hope for something like this. I shouldn't have to beg a political party whose job is to represent constituents to fight for us. But instead, we have to fight with billionaire donors. Voters are forced to compete with billionaires and large multinational corporations for a party that's supposed to be the champions of the working class. It's so ridiculous. So this isn't a gotcha question, and for you not answering it shows that you're a coward, and it proves to us that you celebrate large multinational corporations and billionaires buying off our Democratic Party leaders. You should be ashamed of yourself. And furthermore, this woman was a Fox News contributor for 7 years. So I don't know why you think you're qualified to be the DNC chair, but clearly you have no idea what voters want. And maybe it's the case, even though you said that you were exposed to Republican propaganda and you know how to counter it, maybe that got to your head a little bit, because you clearly don't know what the Democratic Party voters actually want right now. We don't want someone who's going to be beholden to large multinational corporations and billionaires. Hence why we did not come out to support Hillary Clinton, which is why she lost. I'm so frustrated by this. So in sum, none of these candidates prove to me that they are willing to fundamentally reform the party in the way it needs to be reformed in order to make it the party of the people again. So in conclusion, if these are the best candidates that the Democratic Party has to offer, if any of these people will be the next DNC chair, then buckle up, because we're going to have Donald Trump and the Republicans in control of Congress and the White House for a very long time.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.